Hey all, and welcome back to TotA Gaming and a new video on the channel, which is really the second part of my Fresh Trials run. Apologies, it's been a while since the last video. It's been absolutely scorching hot here and not really been the weather to sit behind a computer for time after time. I've actually leveled all the way up to 2000 because I thought doing it at regular intervals doesn't really make much sense. The mechanic doesn't really get difficult until 12 to 1300 onwards, and loot is very RNG. You know, I've seen people get a mage blood, a headhunter, massively expensive items that really defeat the purpose of doing this is how much you can earn from going through the trial. So I thought I would just go through the build I've used, the loot I ended up with, and my experiences and the pros and cons of doing it. So if we start off with the loot overall, I've sold some stuff because my loot was starting to get a bit on top of me. So I've kind of got rid of a lot of the stuff that I don't want to keep, and I've kept stuff that might come in handy. So we've got lots of tomes for Sanctum. I've kept all the tattoos that are worth some sort of currency. I've sold most of the ones that are worth big money. These are all between 10 to 50 chaos each, but at the moment I'm just keeping hold of them. And then this is the currency that we've earned so far. So I would think in total it's around 110 divines worth of currency that I've generated from leveling up to 2000. And I've spent about 1100 silver coins, give or take. So that's obviously around 5 divines worth of currency in terms of entry coins, and then everything else is profit. But I will say it takes a very, very long time to get to 2000, especially with the changes they made in the last patch. So overall, it's definitely not something that's going to match mapping profitability anywhere near, but it's a very brain dead thing to do once you get the right build set up, which we'll come on to in a bit. So this isn't all raw divines. Some of this is from selling items, but I think I've had at least 50 to 55 raw divines drop from the league mechanic. And then, you know, tons of awakened sextants, exalts, annulments. I haven't kept all of my bubblegum currency in here. It's only about level 1500 that I actually started using this currency tab. So I've got loads of bubblegum currency in my other tab that's probably come from the league mechanic, but it's not worth a huge amount of money anyway. And I'm really only valuing the stuff that sells easily in divines, which is pretty much annulments, exalts, and then awakened sextants. Everything else, I've not really put much of a value on it. I've kept some of the uniques. None of them are worth any money. They're just things I picked up through the mechanic. I've sold most of my winged scarabs because they sell super, super quickly. And I had 3 of the 6-link fusing omen drop. Actually, no, I had 4. So I've sold all of those as well. I've kept these because these come in handy. Same with the jewelers. I've kept those as well. And then just a ton of scarabs that I may use or may sell. I haven't decided yet. But yeah, overall, it's around 110 divines. I didn't have any lucky drops. I didn't have anything drop that was really worth more than 2 to 3 divines, other than a pretty well-rolled Ikiato's dance, which I dropped a long time ago. I've got it up for sale. It hasn't sold yet. I've not included it in the profit because I don't know what it's going to go for. I think it's only gone up in price a bit because Mathil did a build on it. And then there's a few bits here and there that will sell. And as I say, I could certainly sell all of these tattoos if I really wanted to. And overall, it was just a very nice way to generate currency, if not super, super slow. The other pro is you can't lose XP. So what I'll probably do is just carry on doing the league mechanic until I get to level 97. Have a look at what currency I've got and see if there is a ranger build that I want to do for my next build. And I would like something that just trivializes content. I think the next build is probably going to be something that can take on sanctums nice and easily and hopefully get through those pretty much 100% of the time. So the first con is since the changes, the enemy AI has gone a bit stupid. The champion pretty much always sits on their totem with their escorts. That basically means that no matter what your build and what team you've got, your fight is going to be 2 to 3 times longer than it would have been before the patch because those enemies would try and get your totem. Now it's very rare that enemies even try and go for any of my totems. They will just hang around in their base. Even the flankers will just stand on their totem. They won't go and try and get my totems down. They just stand there guarding their totem, which makes it very annoying, but also it makes it so that really you have to run a specific trials build to get stuff done in a moderate amount of time, because if you've not got tons of evasion, tons of dodge, tons of block, you're going to get stunned all the time from these enemies, and at level 2000 a lot of them hit like a truck, and regardless of your defenses you're going to get one shot when you get hit. So that is the first key thing I've noticed. The other problem is that some of the champions have a degen that they leave on the ground. Ikiato is the worst. She leaves a cold degen that rips through any life or energy shield you've got very, very quickly. And unless you spot it straight away and you don't get stunned, you're going to get killed pretty much regardless of the life or energy shield that you've got. And then there is another champion, I forget the name, that leaves a fire degen. That doesn't do as much damage. That's about, I would say, 20% of your life per second. So it's easy to move out of the way of. But it does rip through your own team really, really quickly, which means you are basically the only person that can channel a champion totem because everyone else will get one shot by the champion. And it just makes the rounds much, much longer than before. And in all honesty, it makes the league mechanics much less enjoyable and far, far less profitable. Another issue I have, and I understand why they've done it, is that your units are far, far, far weaker than the enemy units, even type on type. So if you have a spear dancer and they have a spear dancer, it will take your spear dancer about 30 hits to kill the enemy spear dancer. Yours will die in about 3. So it basically makes standard units worthless other than as a distraction, which won't last very long because they will get killed very quickly. You basically have team members that will channel. That's kind of all they're there for. Other than that, they're distractions. Once you start getting the bigger units, they can do some damage, like the Ravager here that you get for 1,000. If you get the Righteous Fire mod, that does an absolute ton of damage, and there's a few others that do decent damage, but they're few and far between. Most of the units are honestly just worthless. You just want the quick ones that can channel totems and might dodge an attack or two. They are the units you want. The rest are just fodder. And it gets very frustrating because it basically turns it away from an auto battler, because if you don't get involved and channel totems yourself, you're probably not going to win many encounters because your team will just get obliterated. If the champion decides to sit around the totems, one-shots every single one of your team, and then they don't spawn, then they've got the chance to rush the totems, which they don't do very often, and it just means the fights drag out really, really long. So we'll just go and do the first round of a fresh tournament. I'm just going to pick Ikiato to see if she does the usual thing and just sit on the totem and make it very difficult. She's easily the hardest because she could sit on the totem on her own and basically control the whole zone while she kills all of your warriors and then send all the rest forward to flank. However, they don't seem to have any flankers, so I'm pretty sure in this example, all of these enemies are just going to sit on this totem in the middle. So we'll put some warriors in, just randomly put some in. And then we'll go. So I'm going to try and sit in my base to see if they will move forwards at all. And normally Ikiato doesn't. She'll just sit in the middle. There'll be the odd person that will come forwards. And then you've got to try and get the totems down. I'm already dead. Brilliant. Love that evasion and spell dodge. So as you can see, they're not moving. Even with me dead, they are sitting there. We've got my one defending here. And the rest of them are just sitting around this totem, which makes this super annoying because of that degen that nearly killed me straight away. So all you do is you go around, channeling the totems, hoping that Ikiato doesn't decide to send one of her AoEs your way. So we got quite lucky in this case, but we still have to get her totem down, and that's where the issues are going to be, because you can see how quickly that shreds through your defenses, and it's going to kill all my team as well. So now we've got to get this totem and this totem down with her. Oh, she might be moving. We might get very lucky here. If she moves, that's a definite bonus, because she doesn't normally. Yeah, so we got a bit lucky there because she decided for whatever reason to go and attack my totems when she's got no people left. But even just with that little bit of a disturbance, it pretty much doubled the time because I died twice, whereas normally I wouldn't. But that degen kills you so quickly, it's really hard to get out of the way unless you're stacking like loads of life, which means you're probably missing the defenses that are important for the Trials build. So I'm going to run through the build in general. I'm not going to go through the skill tree and everything in very minute detail because I've built this really specifically for me, and I think a lot of it I haven't done particularly well. I just want to go through the fundamentals of what you need to do if you want to build a Trials-specific character. And they basically revolve around defenses for the most part. At the end stage of Trials at 2000, unless you're doing 100 million DPS, you're not really going to impact much of the battlefield, and you've still got the issue that everything's going to one-shot you. Without defenses, every time you get hit when you channel, that's a 5-second stun. And you're basically relying on your team to do the majority of the work. And since the changes, they don't really do the majority of the work. So if you do want to just play Trials, we'll go through what you need to do. But be warned, my build can only just clear Bud Aqueduct, so do not try and do anything else with this build. So as I mentioned, it's basically going around utility and defenses. So you want max evade chance, which is 95%, But ideally, you want that to be higher than 95. So what I mean by that is if 78k equals 95, and if you went down to 76, it's 94, you want about 100,000 evasion, if not more, because some of the enemies in TotA have 200% increased accuracy, which makes a massive difference to your chance to evade. So at 95% with nothing up, I'm happy with, because then I get frenzy charges, I blind enemies. There's loads of things that give me much more chance to evade. But that on its own would not be enough. You're probably still going to get hit 1 in 3, which is not really enough if you're just doing a degen character for trials. You then want 75% chance to dodge spells, which is essentially 150% spell suppression and this acrobatics keystone. If you don't want to take the keystone, you can run the perfect form body armor, which gives you acrobatics. You've also got the option, if you wanted to try and get the keystone somewhere else with a tattoo, but it's really not worth it. If you want to make this sort of character, go Ranger. You start on the right side of the tree. You get Onslaught, Spell Suppression, and Phasing for free, and lots of evasion and movement speed through Frenzy Charges. I think it's a perfect ascendancy for it. So along with your evasion and your spell dodge, you then want to look at block. And that's going to come in the form of attack block and spell block. And again, you want to max it out where you can. I've been lazy. I could just get this to 75% by adding a jewel into an empty jewel slot. I just haven't felt the need because I have 95% chance to evade attacks anyway. And they're kind of the layers of defense that you want. If you want to go even further, you go CI, because we don't really care about our life. We're going to get one shot anyway. You go CI, that makes you chaos damage immune. And then you can deal with those chaos totems nice and easy. And the champion that does chaos damage does no damage to you whatsoever. She will also stun you when you're channeling totems because these attacks still hit you, or these spells still hit you, but they just don't do any damage because you're immune to it. If you wanted to go cheap, you would then go Eldritch Battery. So you're basically running a build with one effective health pool because your energy shield moves to your mana. It means you then don't have to worry about the mana cost for your attacks and Void Sphere because that's super mana hungry. I've gone a different way, which I will quickly go through, but it's more expensive. And if you just wanted to build for trials, you would just go Eldritch Battery, Chaos Immunity, and then all of the defensive layers that we mentioned, and then as much movement speed as you can, and basically that's it. In terms of how you go about doing that, the easiest way is this bow and quiver combination. So you get Rear Guard, which gives you up to 24% attack block and 15% spell block, and then using the Widow Hail bow, you get percentage increased bonuses from that. You want to get as high a roll on this bow as you can. 240% plus is probably like 50 to 100 chaos. Once you go like getting near the max, like 248, 249, they get silly expensive. But this has been enough for me to easily cap my block. So if we have a look at my block at the moment, it is 75 and 71. If we take these two items off, it goes down to 3% attack block and 24% spell block. So as you can see, you basically get most of your stuff from here. You will need to find some spell block because it rolls less than attack block on the quiver. And you can do that from lots of different ways. Tattoos are a good way of getting some spell block. This node here is also really good. Gives you 6% chance, 8% with the small node, and that also adds to your mana regen, which if you're not doing Eldritch Battery can really help. But there's tons of ways to get enough block. The other way you could do it is there is a jewel you can get that gives you up to 4% of each. There's no limit to how many of these you could run. They're fairly cheap. There's loads of ways just to get your block up. Spell suppression you can get on the tree, you can get from gear, you get from masteries. It's very, very easy, especially on a raider, to get to your 150%. And evasion, again, just take on the tree where you can. Big evasion gear, Watcher's Eye with chance to evade, blind, frenzy charges to get increased evasion, and you'll easily get to your 95% cap. I've spent quite a lot of money on this character because I got a bit invested in it, quite enjoyed building it, but you really don't need to. So the other fundamentals for the build in terms of gear is I would run a marker submission to hex an enemy because you don't get reduced effect. If you run a hex on hit ring, it's always with like a reduced effect. And the rest of the gear is just to cap out your block, evasion, that kind of thing. For your chest, I'd 100% recommend an evasion energy shield hybrid with grace effect and increased non-curse aura effect. And then take any aura effect you can on the tree because that's going to add to your evasion and add to your other auras. So in terms of auras, as I mentioned, I'm running an Enlighten. I'm taking every node on the tree for auras. I think I have a anointment on my helmet. I've got loads and loads of different reductions. I've got free discipline. So I've got lots of different auras on my build. I've got Defiance Banner, Purity, Grace, Discipline, Clarity, Precision, and Haste. You don't need all of those. I've just done this because I wanted to build as well-rounded Trials character as I could, but it's really overkill. As I mentioned, I've gone with reduced mana cost in a lot of places so that I don't have to go Eldritch Battery, and I can actually get some sort of energy shield pull to help with the 2 champions that put degens on the ground, but again, it's not really needed. So they're kind of the fundamentals of your gearing and what you're looking for to build this sort of character. Again, want to reiterate, only do it if you want to do Trials for a long time, because this character will be no good at anything else. There's not really much to go through on the tree because I said I've built it really specifically for my character. You just go and take evasion where you need it. You take suppression where you need it. If you're going to build some energy shield, take some ES. And just take all of the aura effect nodes you can. And things like increased duration and increased AoE are helpful for your Void Sphere. So we'll quickly go through the links inside my gear. So here we've got just the auras linked up with an Enlighten and then more auras here. In my bow, I've got a Mana Forged Arrow set up. So it is Withering Touch, Ensnaring Arrow, Mana Forged Arrows, Frenzy, and Divergent Inspiration. This is essentially just to get more slow on enemies and help generate my frenzy charges even quicker. The 4-link Void Sphere is probably the most important part. It's Phantasmal Void Sphere because that pulses the sphere more regularly, which means it pulls the enemies back, and they basically won't get anywhere near you other than the champions. Got Enhanced level 4 in there to add even more pulse effect. Got increased AoE to give the actual Void Sphere more area of effect, and an increased duration so it hangs around for long enough. With that and the nodes I've got on the tree, my Void Sphere lasts longer than my cooldown. So if we put Void Sphere down, we can see the cooldown ticking here. Void Sphere, an absolutely huge one. This will take up most of the battlefield, and the cooldown has just ended there, and my Void Sphere is still ticking for another 1 to 2 seconds. Now, it's not quite as good as having Second Wind because you can reposition your Void Sphere if you have more than one charge, but you can only have one Void Sphere up at a time. I'm happy with this. I've not lost a round since level 1000, apart from one where I forfeited because the big turtle was there and I had no one decent in DPS, so I just quit. Other than that, I've won every single tournament from level 1000. So my 6-link, I don't actually have one. I have a Flame Dash wedged in here because I didn't have another slot for it. And I'm running a 5-link Split Arrow setup. Split Arrow just because it fires lots of arrows. Withering Touch to slow down the enemy. Anomalous Blind to blind them. Faster attack so that I can blind and get my Wither on quicker. And then knockback support to knock back the enemy. This doesn't do a huge amount, but it does keep them away from you and is enough to knock them off the totems. So that's kind of my 5-link. You could probably do away with blind and run a 4-link. You really don't need more than that. And then I'm just making sure that my Split Arrow is more than my Mana Forge. Now, ideally it would be more, but I don't have room to put a 6 support gem without dropping Flame Dash, which to be fair, I could do. You don't really need it in Trials, but I kind of don't want to spend any more time on this build because my Mana Forge doesn't quite proc as regularly as it should, but it's regularly enough. And then in my Marker Submission, there is just a temp chains. And that's kind of it. You then want to get your gear to get your suppression, get your evasion, get your block, and just make sure that you will get hit very, very infrequently. And then the lead mechanic is an absolute breeze. So that's kind of it for the build. My full POB will be in the video description. But again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend copying it because I've probably spent like 15 to 20 divines on this build unnecessarily. So just take the fundamentals of what you need to do to build your character if you want to do it. But just be warned, the lead mechanic is nowhere near as fun as it was. And if you're someone who think you might get bored of it within a couple of hours, is it really worth leveling a fresh character? Every character has to start from level 0 in Trials. There's lots of things that kind of build into it, along with the overall feeling that loot just is not as lucrative anymore because of how long they take. That is it for the video. Very mumbly and long-winded. Apologies, but that's it. Take care. See you in the next one.